The docking clamp hissed, a sound nearly lost in the cacophony of an average Tuesday aboard the human freighter, the Attic. Captain Eva Rostova grunted as she wrestled a stubborn crate labeled Grandma Anya's Sauerkraut Vintage 2247, Do Not Irradiate, into a slightly less precarious position in the ship's main hold. The hold, like every other accessible inch of the attic, was a testament to humanity's apparent inability to throw anything away. Old engine cowlings served as planters for surprisingly resilient space cabbages. Stacks of physical data slates, their magnetic media long since obsolete, propped up a worktable made from a repurposed cryopod lid. A faded, slightly sticky poster advertising Rigelian sandworm races, thrills and spills was taped over a dented bulkhead. "Captain," came the crisp, slightly tinny voice of her first mate, Jax, over the comm. "Inspector Vril of the Xyla Collective is requesting permission to board. Standard customs check." Eva wiped a smear of what she hoped was just grease from her cheek. "Permission granted, Jax. Just try to steer him away from Cargo Bay 3. The commemorative spoon collection from Old Earth is currently experiencing a minor avalanche." "Understood, Captain. Minimalist incoming." Inspector Vril was the epitome of Xyla. Tall, slender, with opalescent skin that shimmered faintly under the harsh utility lights of the docking bay. His uniform was a single, seamless piece of dark, matte fabric that probably cleaned itself and offered level 5 hazard protection. His expression, as he stepped onto the attic's worn deck plating, was one of carefully controlled distaste. The Xyla Collective prided themselves on efficiency, on minimalism, on a streamlined existence devoid of unnecessary baggage, physical or emotional. They viewed humanity, with their sentimental attachment to objects and their chaotic, cluttered environments, as overly sentimental hoarders. It wasn't outright hostility, more a sort of bewildered pity, the kind one might reserve for a child who stubbornly refused to tidy their room. "Captain Rostova," Vril stated, his voice a modulated, perfectly even tone. His eyes, large and dark, did a slow sweep of the visible portion of the cargo bay, lingering for a microsecond on a tangled net full of antique fishing lures. "Your manifest lists assorted historical artifacts and sundry personal effects. A rather broad categorization." Eva offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're a culturally rich people, Inspector, lots of history, lots of sundries." She patted a nearby stack of vinyl records, their covers depicting bizarrely coiffed musicians from centuries past. "Keeps the void from feeling too empty." Vril's delicate nostrils flared almost imperceptibly. The Xyla philosophy posits that emptiness fosters clarity, clutter breeds inefficiency. "Your vessel, Captain, appears to be a monument to inefficiency." He gestured with a slender, three-fingered hand towards a corner piled high with what looked like ancient atmospheric processors, cobwebbed and dented. "Are these units even functional?" Those are Big Bessie and her sisters," Eva said, a genuine warmth in her voice. "Pulled them out of a derelict colony stationed back in the Kepler belt. Haven't had the heart to scrap 'em. You never know when you might need a good, old-fashioned CO2 scrubber that runs on prayer and elbow grease." Inspector Vril made a small note on his sleek, transparent data slate. Eva suspected it read something along the lines of "Subject exhibits irrational attachment to obsolete and potentially hazardous scrap metal." "Your modern life support systems are, I presume, up to Xyla standards?" Vril asked, though it sounded more like an accusation. "Top of the line, Inspector," Jax's voice interjected smoothly as he joined them, navigating a narrow path between a stack of actual paper books and a disused coffee percolator that now housed a thriving terrarium of moss. "Triple redundant, fully automated, self-diagnosing. The latest Series 9 Xyla core regulators." Vril nodded, a flicker of something like approval in his eyes. "That, at least, is commendable. The Xyla core represents the pinnacle of efficient, reliable environmental control. It requires minimal oversight and functions flawlessly." He paused. "Unlike, one might surmise, Big Bessie." The inspection continued in a similar vein. Vril meticulously documented every anachronism, every piece of apparent junk, his expression a carefully maintained mask of professional neutrality that nevertheless screamed primitive hoarders. Eva and Jax endured it with practiced patience. It wasn't the first time they'd been on the receiving end of Xyla disdain. To the collective, human ships were floating museums of the unnecessary, mobile fire hazards crammed with sentiment. As Inspector Vril finally prepared to depart, his parting words were, "May your journey be uncluttered, Captain, for your own safety and efficiency." "We manage, Inspector," Eva said, leaning against a crate of antique toasters. "We always manage." Once the Xyla shuttle had undocked, Jax let out a long breath. Sweet space, that was tense. I thought he was going to issue us a citation for excessive nostalgia. Eva chuckled. "He just doesn't get it, Jax. This isn't junk, this is potential, and memories, mostly potential junk, but still." She kicked an old, heavy-duty mechanical toolbox that slid across the deck. "Besides, their fancy minimalist tech is great until it isn't." It was a prophetic statement. The attic was 3 days out from Xyla space, navigating a relatively quiet sector known for its stunning, if somewhat placid, nebulae, when the universe decided to throw a spanner in the works. It started subtly, a faint shimmer in the visual sensors dismissed as cosmic dust, then a peculiar warble in the long-range comms. Jax, a tech wizard despite his laid-back demeanor, was frowning at his console. "Weird interference, Skipper, getting some very strange energy readings, not localized. It's sector-wide, looks like." Eva joined him on the bridge, which, while more organized than the cargo hold, still boasted a collection of Lucky Charms dangling from the ceiling and a decidedly non-standard, plush captain's chair she'd salvaged from a luxury liner. "Define strange. Like nothing I've ever seen, high-frequency chronoton particles, but pulsed, phased, almost like a wave." Jax's fingers flew across his controls, "and it's getting stronger." Then the lights flickered. The smooth hum of the Xyla core environmental regulators faltered, coughed, and died. Emergency lights, powered by a separate, cruder system, blinked on, casting long, eerie shadows. "Report," Eva snapped, already moving towards the manual override for the life support. "Main power fluctuating. The Xyla core is offline. Trying to reboot, no response." Jax sounded alarmed now. "It's not just life support, Captain. Primary navigation is down. Main drive controls are unresponsive. Anything running on the new integrated circuits seems to be fried." A wave of nausea passed over Eva. It wasn't space sickness. It felt deeper, like her own internal wiring was being subtly scrambled. The chronoton radiation. "Must be," Jax said, his voice tight. "It's like it's specifically targeting hyper-efficient, miniaturized tech. The more complex and integrated the circuits, the more vulnerable they are. Our backup systems, the older ones, they seem okay." Eva reached the environmental control panel. The sleek Xyla interface was dark. Beside it, however, was a clunky, metal-cased panel with actual physical dials and levers, part of a system she'd insisted on keeping when they last refitted. It was an archaic atmospheric recycler, a direct descendant of Big Bessie. With a grunt, she threw a heavy switch. A low, rumbling groan echoed through the deck plates, followed by the reassuring hiss of air beginning to circulate. It wasn't as silent or efficient as the Xyla core, but it was working. "Air back on," she announced. "Jax, damage report, what is working?" The next hour was a blur of frantic activity. The attic's advanced systems, the pride of their last upgrade, mostly Xyla-designed or influenced, were almost entirely useless. The sophisticated nav computer, the automated cargo lifters, the high-efficiency plasma conduits for the main engines, even the autochef that produced perfectly synthesized nutrient paste, were all dark. But the attic was old, and she was full of junk. The backup generator, a monstrous diesel punk contraption that normally only ran during full system purges, roared to life after some creative percussive maintenance from their engineer, a grizzled woman named Lena who communicated mostly in grunts and wrench throws. The emergency comms, an ancient rig that used vacuum tubes bigger than Eva's fist, crackled with static, but was incredibly functional. The old magnetic gyro stabilization system, which Eva had kept for sentimental reasons, and because it was too heavy to easily remove, engaged with a shudder, steadying the ship. "Main engines are shot if we rely on the plasma feeds," Lena reported, her face smudged with grime. But the old chemical thrusters, the ones we use for planetary maneuvering, they're on a completely separate, mechanically governed fuel line. I can get 'em firing, but it'll be slow and thirsty. Do it, Eva ordered. Jax, what are you picking up on that museum piece you call a comm system? Jax was hunched over the ancient radio, fiddling with dials. Distress calls, Captain, lots of them, all across the sector. Ships are going dark. Stations are reporting total system failures. It's chaos out there. The Xyla, they seem to be hit hardest. Their whole infrastructure is based on that advanced tech. A chilling thought struck Eva. Inspector Vril, his sleek, minimalist ship, entirely dependent on those sophisticated systems. He and countless others like him. Lena, Eva said, her voice firm. Get us moving, slow and steady. Jax, plot a course to the nearest Xyla outpost, Xylos Prime, or where it's supposed to be, and start broadcasting on all frequencies, old and new. Tell them the human freighter attic is operational, running on old-school tech, and offering assistance. The Xyla considered them hoarders, inefficient sentimentalists. Now, their hoarded inefficiency might be the only thing capable of navigating this new, suddenly primitive reality. The journey to Xylos Prime was like sailing through a graveyard of silent giants. Sleek, beautiful Xyla cruisers and transports drifted, powerless. Orbital stations, marvels of minimalist design, were dark, their delicate systems inert. The Chronoton wave had been devastatingly effective, a precise scalpel excising the galaxy's most advanced technological nerves. The attic, chugging along on its rumbling chemical thrusters, its hull cluttered with oddments and jury-rigged patches, felt like a noisy, archaic ghost haunting a futuristic mausoleum. Its internal atmosphere was a bit too humid, the lights flickered occasionally, and the smell of ozone from the overworked backup generator was thick in the air. But it was alive. Jax managed to raise Xylos Prime, or what was left of its command structure. The voice that responded was weak, laced with static and desperation. It was a Xyla logistics officer trapped in the main orbital dock with thousands of others, life support failing, no way to undock, no way to call for help through their fried comms. Human vessel attic, the Xyla voice crackled, full of disbelief. Your systems, they are functional. Functional enough, Xylos Prime, Eva replied, her voice steady. We are running on what you might call vintage hardware. Our advanced systems are as dead as yours. What's your situation? The story was grim. The Chronoton wave had been like an EMP designed specifically for Xyla technology. Their entire society, built on seamless integration and hyper-efficiency, had collapsed in an instant. Manual overrides were few and far between. Why would a perfect system need them? Redundancy was often seen as inefficient clutter. We don't have the old knowledge, the Xyla officer admitted, his perfect composure cracking. Our engineers, they only know the current systems, how to operate things manually. It is a lost art. Eva looked at Lena, who was currently using a crowbar to adjust a fuel valve that should have been electronically controlled. Lena just grinned, a fierce, oily smile. Well, Xylos Prime, Eva said into the comm. Looks like it's time for a history lesson. Docking the attic at Xylos Prime was a feat of old-fashioned seamanship. With the automated docking clamps useless, Lena and a team of human volunteers had to physically winch them into place using manual cranks found in a forgotten storage locker. Cranks originally designed for deploying solar sails on a pre-hyperdrive generation ship. Stepping onto Xylos Prime was like entering a pristine museum where all the exhibits had suddenly broken. Xyla, usually so composed, were huddled in corridors, their opalescent skin looking dull in the faint emergency lighting. The air was thin and cold. The first thing Eva's crew did was deploy Big Bessie and her sisters. The ancient Co-2 scrubbers, hauled out of the attic's hold and powered by portable generators, also antiques, roared to life, slowly but surely improving the air quality in the main habitat ring. Xyla engineers watched, mystified, as Lena and her team coaxed the wheezing machines into operation with nothing more than wrenches, oil cans, and a surprising amount of affectionate cursing. Next came power. The attic's main fusion reactor was toast, but its collection of salvage generators, solar arrays from defunct satellites, and even a few experimental and highly unreliable zero-point energy taps were pressed into service. Cables, thick as a Xyla's arm, snaked from the human ship into the station, bypassing the fried Xyla power grid and directly feeding essential systems, or what could be salvaged of them. Then came the knowledge transfer. Human engineers, mechanics, and even hobbyists from the crew began teaching the Xyla how to coax life back into their dead technology, or more often, how to bypass it entirely, how to manually align a communication dish using optical sights and mathematical tables printed on actual paper, how to hotwire a door mechanism, how to filter water using charcoal and sand when the sonic purifiers failed, how to navigate by star charts, actual charts, made of polymer paper, not holographic displays, when the sophisticated astrogation systems were blank. Eva found herself in the station's command center, a place usually gleaming with holographic displays and silent, efficient Xyla officers. Now it was dim, cold, and crowded with humans and Xyla alike, all poring over schematics that were, in some cases, centuries old, salvaged from the attic's digital archives stored on robust, heavily shielded magnetic discs. Inspector Vril was there. He looked smaller somehow, his usual crisp uniform smudged, his opalescent skin lacking its usual luster. He watched as Jax patiently explained to a high-ranking Xyla technician how to use a slide rule, a physical slide rule from Eva's own collection of educational antiques. Captain Rostova, Vril said, his voice quiet, devoid of its usual condescension. He gestured around the chaotic command center, now festooned with jury-rigged wiring and cluttered with human tools and artifacts. This is remarkable. Your collections, they are saving us. Eva leaned against a console that was currently being used as a surface to unroll a massive, hand-drawn blueprint of an old-style atmospheric pump. We call it being prepared for a rainy day, Inspector. Turns out, sometimes it rains chronotons. We dismissed it as sentimentality, Vril admitted, looking at a human crew member who was expertly splicing a cable using tools that looked like they belonged in a museum. As inefficiency, we believed our way, the streamlined way, was superior, perfect. Nothing's perfect, Inspector, Eva said gently. Everything has a failure point. Sometimes the old ways, the clunky ways, the ways that have more moving parts and require a bit of know-how instead of just a button press, sometimes they're more resilient because they're simpler. Less to go wrong that you can't fix with a hammer and some hope. Over the next few weeks, the attic became a lifeline, not just for Xylos Prime, but for the surrounding systems. Other human ships, equally cluttered, equally inefficient, began to arrive, their crews sharing their hoarded knowledge and their hoarded robust technology. They weren't fast, they weren't elegant, but they worked. They ferried supplies, rescued stranded crews, and helped reactive basic infrastructure on planets and stations where the advanced tech had utterly failed. The Xyla and other similarly advanced races who had also suffered, watched and learned. They learned that an old, clunky mechanical pump, though noisy and inefficient, was better than a silent, perfect sonic pump that didn't work at all. They learned that knowledge stored on durable physical media could outlast elegantly fragile data crystals. They learned that a ship crammed with spare parts, old tools, and seemingly useless junk was, in fact, a ship prepared for almost anything. The term overly sentimental hoarders began to fade from galactic parlance, replaced with a grudging, then growing respect. Humanity's penchant for collecting, for preserving, for just-in-case thinking was re-evaluated. It wasn't immaturity, it was a different kind of wisdom. A wisdom born of a species that had experienced countless societal collapses and technological regressions on their own homeworld, long before they reached the stars. They had learned, deep in their cultural bones, that progress wasn't always linear, and that sometimes the past held the keys to surviving the future. Deep technological redundancy, one Xyla scholar called it, attempting to categorize the human approach in terms their logic could grasp. Practical historical archiving enacted on a continuous basis. Eva just called it not throwing out the good stuff. Months later, when the initial crisis had passed and the slow, arduous process of rebuilding and rethinking galactic infrastructure had begun, Inspector Vril visited the attic again. The freighter was even more cluttered now, if possible, having accumulated salvage from a dozen rescue missions. Vril didn't comment on the clutter. Instead, he presented Eva with a small, carefully wrapped package, a token of the Xyla Collective's gratitude, Captain. Eva unwrapped it. Inside was a beautifully crafted but undeniably old-fashioned brass sextant. "Inspector," she said, surprised, "it's antique." Vril managed a small, almost human-like smile. "Indeed, we are beginning to appreciate the resilience of certain older designs. It was found in our deep archives. We thought you of all people might appreciate it." He paused. "We are also instituting a new initiative, the Rostova Protocol, they are calling it, mandatory inclusion of diverse-age technological backups in all critical systems, and we're starting historical technology workshops." Eva hefted the sextant. It felt solid, reliable. "Well, I'll be the Xyla becoming hoarders. Perhaps curators of contingency options, Captain," Vril corrected gently. "But yes, your human way has taught us a valuable lesson. Efficiency is not the only virtue. Sometimes a little bit of well-preserved junk can be the most valuable thing in the universe." The attic continued its journeys, still cluttered, still occasionally breaking down in minor, fixable ways. But now, when it docked at Xyla ports, the inspectors didn't just see a heap of disorganized junk. They saw a ship that had weathered the storm, a testament to the enduring power of keeping things just in case. They saw not hoarders, but pioneers of a different, more resilient kind of progress. And sometimes, they'd even ask Eva if she had a spare part for some ancient piece of equipment they were trying to understand, because humanity, it turned out, had kept the receipts for the entire galaxy's technological attic.